cold, wealthy CEO divorced his wife while their 4-year-old cried. 18 years later, she returned as a lawyer. The mahogany doors of the New York Supreme Court swung open as Layla approached the plaintiff's table, her designer heels clicking against marble in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat, each step 18 years in the making. Beside her walked Matthew, tall, poised, with his father's unmistakable eyes and jawline. What did that moment feel like when it finally arrived? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The courtroom fell silent as she rose from her chair. 18 years of calculated patience, culminating in this moment when Nathan Prescott would finally see the woman he discarded and the son he never knew existed. Layla Montgomery straightened her tailored blazer, feeling the weight of every sacrifice. Every late night, studying law books while her baby slept, every moment that led to this showdown. The high-profile lawsuit against Prescott Industries wasn't just about corporate justice. It was personal reckoning. When Nathan Prescott entered, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd never lost. His custom suit couldn't hide the slight gray at his temples, the only visible sign that time had passed since that frozen Boston night when he'd thrown her out without a second glance. The mahogany doors of the New York Supreme Court swung open as Layla approached the plaintiff's table, her designer heels clicking against marble in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat, each step 18 years in the making. Beside her walked Matthew, tall, poised, with his father's unmistakable eyes and jawline. Nathan's attention fixed on her first, professional recognition quickly replaced by shock as his gaze drifted to the young man at her side. His careful composure cracked, just for a moment, revealing something raw underneath the corporate armor. All rise, the bailiff called, but Nathan remained frozen, staring at the living proof of what he'd abandoned. "Mr. Prescott," Layla said, her voice carrying just enough for him to hear, "I believe you haven't met my son." She emphasized the last word, watching his face drain of color. Or should I say, our son. Matthew turned toward his father for the first time, curiosity battling with 18 years of carefully constructed indifference. The resemblance between them struck everyone in the courtroom. DNA made visible in matching posture, identical expressions of carefully controlled emotion. As Nathan's attorney whispered urgently in his ear, Layla slid a document across the table. DNA results proving what her words alone never could. The mighty CEO of Prescott Industries, the man who fired executives without blinking, who demolished competing companies over breakfast, stood speechless as the life he thought he knew collapsed around him. "I think," Layla said with quiet confidence, "we should discuss settlement options in private. Have you ever waited years to confront someone who broke you? Did you imagine their face when they finally realized what they'd done? The moment when everything they believed about themselves and their life shattered like glass?" Drop a comment below if you've ever fantasized about the perfect revenge, or if you've actually lived it. What did that moment feel like when it finally arrived? 18 years earlier, she had stood shivering in that Boston winter night, clutching their infant son while security removed her belongings. Tonight, she would sleep in a Manhattan penthouse paid for by the cases she won against men exactly like him. The conference room door closed behind them, leaving Layla face-to-face with Nathan and the attorneys on both sides. Matthew waited outside, following his mother's instructions despite his burning questions. "This is impossible," Nathan finally said, staring at the DNA results. "Apparently not," Layla replied, her voice steady despite the hurricane inside her chest. The memories rushed back unbidden. His cold stare as guards escorted her out, the infant Matthew wailing against her shoulder. The December wind had cut through her thin coat as she watched movers empty their shared life onto the sidewalk. Her wedding rings still warm on her finger, while his heart turned to ice inside the mansion they once called home. "You had a son," Nathan's attorney whispered. "A Prescott heir the board knows nothing about." "I had more than that," Nathan said quietly, eyes locked on Layla. "I had a wife who supposedly betrayed me." "Supposedly?" Layla's laugh held no humor. "That's new. You didn't seem uncertain when you had security drag me out while I begged you to listen. The night before happened, they'd made love in their four-poster bed, his lips tracing promises on her skin, whispering plans for their future. 12 hours later, those same lips had curled with disgust as he showed her fabricated photos of her supposed infidelity. The evidence, he began, was fake, she finished. Something I told you repeatedly while your goons packed my clothes and our son's bottles. Remember what you said when I held up our baby? That he probably wasn't even yours. The attorneys shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the corporate negotiation they prepared for. That first night in the cheap motel, as she tucked baby Matthew into a crib rented by the hour, Layla made two promises: that her son would never know abandonment, and that one day, Nathan Prescott would feel the same devastation he had inflicted upon them both. "I'd like to meet him," Nathan said, his voice barely audible. "You think it's that simple?" Layla's eyes flashed. "You think you can walk into his life after 18 years and play daddy? He's graduating Harvard next month. No thanks to you. What would you do if everything you built together was ripped away in a single night? Would you crumble or rebuild? Imagine working your way from homelessness to Harvard law, raising a child alone while your ex lived in luxury, believing lies about you. Could you forgive, or would you hold on to that pain until you could use it as a weapon? Tell me your survival story in the comments. I read every single one. The lawsuit threatening Prescott Industries was merely the bait. The real trap was ensuring Nathan would have no choice but to face her alone, in the conference room where 18 years of calculated patience would finally pay dividends. The plaintiff alleges corporate espionage. Layla's associate summarized, outlining how Prescott Industries had stolen proprietary technology from their client. "We have evidence of illegal access to servers, copied code, and internal emails discussing how to disguise the theft. What the associates didn't know was that Layla had chosen this case specifically, a technical violation with irrefutable proof, but one that wouldn't destroy the company. She didn't want Prescott Industries bankrupt. She wanted Nathan cornered. Given the evidence, we recommend immediate mediation," Nathan's attorney suggested. "I agree," Layla said smoothly, "but only with Mr. Prescott himself present. My client insists on speaking directly with the CEO." The conference room overlooked Manhattan's skyline, glass and steel reflecting their hardened expressions as they circled each other with careful words that barely concealed 2 decades of unfinished business. When the door closed behind their legal teams, leaving them alone for 15 minutes of direct negotiation, the real conversation began. "You set this up," Nathan said, loosening his tie. "This isn't about the lawsuit." "Smart one." Layla's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Though the lawsuit is legitimate, you really should screen your engineers better." "Why now?" he asked. "After 18 years, Matthew deserved to know the truth before starting his life. And I promised myself you would face what you did." When he reached for the water pitcher, their fingers brushed accidentally. Both pulled back as if burned, the brief contact sending unwanted electricity through them. "You've changed," he observed, voice lower than intended. "Necessity," she replied, "is quite the transformation specialist." "I never thought." "That's the problem," she cut him off. "You never thought. Not about whether those photos were real. Not about whether I deserved a chance to defend myself. Not about your son growing up without a father." He studied her face, the determined set of her jaw, the fire in eyes that once looked at him with love. "I made a terrible mistake." "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was choose to believe the worst about me without question. You threw away our family." When Nathan's attorney knocked, signaling time was up, Layla slid an unmarked envelope across the polished table. "Before we discuss the lawsuit," she said, "let's discuss the real reason I'm here." Inside were photos of Matthew growing up, first steps, little league games, science fairs, graduation. Every milestone Nathan had missed captured in chronological order. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m., the Harrison restaurant. Matthew has agreed to meet you. Don't be late and come alone." She gathered her papers, pausing at the door. "And Nathan, if you hurt him again, there won't be enough money in your empire to fix what I'll break. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known your strength? That moment when they realize you're not the same person they discarded? The look in their eyes when they understand you've transformed pain into power? How did you prove them wrong? Share your triumph below. I love reading stories about people who turned their wounds into weapons and their scars into strength. Matthew Prescott had his father's eyes, his father's name, but none of his father's knowledge. For 18 years, Layla had protected her son from the truth about the man who walked away before his first steps. The Harrisons' private dining room felt too small for the weight of their shared history. Nathan arrived 15 minutes early, ordering water and checking his reflection in his phone camera like a nervous teenager. When Layla and Matthew entered, the restaurant owner himself escorted them, eyeing the trio with barely disguised curiosity. "Matthew," Layla said formally, "this is Nathan Prescott, your biological father." The young man extended his hand with measured control. "Mr. Prescott." Nathan took his son's hand, visibly affected by the first physical contact with the child he'd never known. "Matthew, you can call me Nathan, if that's more comfortable." They settled into uncomfortable silence until the waiter took their orders. Matthew studied the man across the table with analytical precision. "Mom said you were convinced she was unfaithful," Matthew began without preamble. "I read about confirmation bias in my psychology courses. People tend to believe evidence that supports what they already think." Nathan's eyebrows rose at the clinical assessment. "I was wrong, catastrophically wrong. Were you looking for an excuse?" Matthew pressed. "Was marrying beneath your social class becoming inconvenient?" "Matthew," Layla cautioned, though pride flickered in her eyes. "No, it's a fair question," Nathan said. "The answer is no. I loved your mother completely, but my family, particularly my mother, never accepted her. They planted doubts I should have dismissed." Matthew's Harvard acceptance letter lay between them on the table, the scholarship notation highlighting what Nathan had failed to provide. Yet somehow, the boy had become extraordinary without his father's money or influence. "I'd like a DNA test," Nathan said quietly. "Not because I doubt. You're clearly my son, but for legal purposes. I want to amend my will immediately." Layla's protective instinct flared. "We don't need your money." "It's not about need," Nathan replied, his eyes never leaving Matthew. "It's about birthright. And 18 years of absence I can never repay, but can at least acknowledge." Matthew squared his shoulders, a gesture so like Nathan's that Layla felt momentary vertigo. She watched as Nathan noticed his son's every movement, his expression a mixture of wonder and regret. Something in her hardened heart shifted uncomfortably. "I have questions," Matthew said, "about your family, about what happened. Mom has only told me her side." As security approached their table, restaurant management concerned about the intensity of their conversation, Matthew turned to his mother with confusion burning in his eyes. "You said my father died," he whispered, voice breaking. "In every way that mattered," she answered. "He did. What makes someone a real parent? Biology or presence? The person who created you or the one who shaped you? Is it ever too late to become the parent you should have been?" I've read stories of reunions decades in the making, some healing, others reopening wounds best left closed. Would you want to know a parent who abandoned you? Or is some absence better left unfilled? Share your thoughts in the comments. And tell me if you believe 18 years can ever be made up. The flash drive arrived anonymously at her hotel suite. What it contained would either destroy Nathan Prescott completely or force her to question 18 years of justified hatred. Layla turned the unmarked drive in her fingers, suspicious of its appearance the day after their restaurant meeting. The note attached said only, "What you weren't meant to see." She debated calling Nathan to ask if he'd sent it, but something told her this came from elsewhere. Security protocols from her legal training kicked in as she used her dedicated laptop to examine the contents. The files were organized by date, beginning 3 months before her marriage to Nathan and continuing through their divorce. The laptop screen illuminated her face in the darkened hotel room, each document revealing fragments of a conspiracy that had robbed Matthew of his father and her of the life she'd once treasured. Emails between Nathan's mother, Elizabeth Prescott, and a private investigator detailed surveillance of Layla from the beginning. Find something, Elizabeth had written. I don't care what. This marriage cannot continue. Layla's hands trembled as she opened photo files. The originals before manipulation. The images showing her in compromising positions with her supposed lover had been expertly altered. The man's face was digitally replaced. The locations were fabricated. Emails from Elizabeth to the family attorney discussed removing the problem and protecting the Prescott bloodline. The most damning email came just before the divorce. Nathan is asking too many questions. Accelerate the evidence delivery. I want her gone by Christmas. Her phone rang at midnight, displaying Nathan's number. She hesitated before answering. Did you send me a flash drive? She asked without greeting. No. His voice was rough with exhaustion. But I received one too, with a note saying you got the same files. The intimacy of their voices in darkness reminded her of late-night calls during their courtship, whispered conversations about dreams and fears before wealth and family had poisoned everything. Did you look at it? She asked. Yes. A long pause followed. Layla, I swear I never knew. The investigator reported directly to my mother. She intercepted your calls, your letters, trying to explain. I left 37 messages, Layla said, her voice catching. I sent certified letters. I stood outside your office for hours. She had you blacklisted with security at all Prescott properties. I was told you'd taken a settlement and disappeared by choice. His voice broke. I looked for you 6 months later when I started questioning things. You were gone without a trace. I had to be, she whispered. Your lawyers threatened to sue for custody if I ever contacted you again. I couldn't risk losing Matthew too. The last email in the chain bore the signature of Elizabeth Prescott, orchestrating each piece of evidence that had destroyed their marriage. The realization hit her like physical pain. She had built 18 years of hatred on a foundation that was now crumbling beneath her. We need to talk in person, Nathan said. Not about the past, about what we do now. Central Park, she decided. The boathouse. Midnight tomorrow. Don't bring anyone. After hanging up, she stared at Matthew's sleeping form on the hotel's second bed. Everything she'd told him about his father was based on a betrayal more complex than she'd understood. The man she'd painted as a monster was himself a victim, the one cushioned by wealth and privilege while she'd struggled through poverty. Have you ever discovered that what you believed for years might be wrong? That moment when the villain in your story might actually be someone else entirely? How do you reconcile with a truth that changes everything you thought you knew? The hardest part isn't forgiving the person you blamed. It's forgiving yourself for building a life around a narrative that wasn't entirely true. Comment below if you've ever had your reality shifted by new information about your past. They met in Central Park after midnight, two adversaries with a shared enemy. The family that had engineered their destruction for reasons neither fully understood. The boathouse stood dark and locked, so they walked instead, following paths illuminated only by scattered lamps. Early April chill cut through Layla's light jacket, but she refused to show discomfort. Nathan noticed anyway, removing his coat and offering it without comment. She hesitated before accepting. My mother always hated when I dated outside our social circle, Nathan said, breaking their uneasy silence. But with you, it was different, more intense. I never understood why. Because I wasn't temporary, Layla replied. The others were distractions. I was the one you married, despite her objections. Rain dripped from the leaves above the park bench where they sat just far enough apart to avoid contact, yet close enough that the familiar scent of his cologne triggered memories her mind had buried, but her body remembered. What do we tell Matthew? She asked. For 18 years, I've told him you abandoned us willingly. Tell him the truth, that I failed him by trusting the wrong people. I should have fought harder. He turned to face her directly, that his mother was extraordinary for raising him alone while building a legal career. Thunder rumbled in the distance as dark clouds obscured the moon. We should head back, Layla said, rising from the bench. The skies opened without warning, heavy rain instantly soaking them both. Nathan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the nearest shelter, the park's stone gazebo. They ran together through the downpour, arriving breathless under the domed roof. Your place or mine? He asked practically, gesturing to the storm. Neither of us is getting a taxi in this. Yours is closer, she admitted reluctantly. His penthouse was 3 blocks away, the doorman's surprised expression at their drenched appearance quickly masked by professional courtesy. The elevator ride passed in awkward silence, water pooling at their feet. You should change, Nathan said as they entered his apartment. I'll find something for you to wear. The penthouse gleamed with floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. But he wasn't looking at the view worth millions. He was looking at her like she was priceless. He returned with a t-shirt and sweatpants, directing her to the guest bathroom. When she emerged, he had changed into similar casual clothes, his hair still damp. The man before her looked more like the Nathan she'd married than the CEO she'd faced in court, Vaughn. I haven't stopped thinking about you, he admitted, voice dropping to match the intimate space between them. Not just in seeing you again. For 18 years, lightning flashed, illuminating her face as she stepped closer. I try to hate you completely, she whispered. It would have been easier. His fingers traced her jawline with such reverence it nearly broke her. This touch, so familiar yet foreign, belonging to a time before betrayal had hardened them both. We shouldn't, she whispered, even as her body arched toward his. When his lips met hers, 18 years collapsed into nothingness. Her hands found his shoulders, his chest, relearning territory once memorized. They moved together with the muscle memory of former lovers, each touch igniting responses neither had experienced with anyone else. Just as his hands slid beneath her borrowed shirt, the elevator chimed. They broke apart, breathing heavily, as the doors opened to reveal Elizabeth Prescott standing in the penthouse entryway, her cold smile freezing them in place. How touching, she said, glancing between them. Almost like old times. Except this reunion ends now. When is forgiveness possible after betrayal? When does the body remember what the mind tries to forget? That moment when a single touch breaks through years of carefully constructed walls. Have you experienced it? That pull towards someone who once hurt you deeply, knowing it's unwise but feeling powerless against it? Physical chemistry can ignite instantly, but trust takes much longer to rebuild. Tell me your experience in the comments. Did you listen to your head or your heart when facing the person who broke you? Elizabeth Prescott stood before them like a cobra, elegant, lethal, and responsible for injecting 18 years of poison into their fractured family. Mother, Nathan's voice hardened as he moved instinctively in front of Layla. What did you get in? I still have the override code, Elizabeth replied, immaculate in midnight blue despite the late hour. The board meeting tomorrow, the one where you plan to announce this development? She gestured dismissively toward Layla. It's been postponed. You have no authority to. I spoke with the chairman personally. Elizabeth interrupted. Mention concerns about your judgment being compromised by personal matters. Layla stepped around Nathan, refusing to be hidden. You engineered everything, didn't you? The fake photos, the intercepted messages, all to get rid of me. Elizabeth's Chanel suit couldn't disguise the ugliness of her words as she outlined exactly why she'd orchestrated their separation. Bloodlines and balance sheets, matching more than her son's happiness or her grandson's birthright. The Prescott name extends back 5 generations, Elizabeth said, her diamond earrings catching light as she turned. We built this city's skyline. Our family donations fund hospital wings and university buildings. Did you really think we would allow our legacy to be diluted by? Choose your next words carefully, Nathan warned, his voice dangerously quiet. By someone unsuitable, Elizabeth finished. A nobody from Georgia with no connections, no pedigree, nothing to contribute to our family standing. Except love, Layla said simply. I loved your son. I gave birth to your grandson, a brilliant young man you've never met because of your prejudice. Elizabeth scoffed. Love doesn't build empires. No, Nathan said, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with Layla. But it builds families, something you clearly know nothing about. The warmth of his arm against hers sent a current through Layla's body, the protective stance awakening feelings she tried to bury. His cologne mixed with the rain-fresh scent of his skin, distracting her even amid the confrontation. You destroyed everything I loved because she didn't fit your narrow vision of acceptable, Nathan said, voice dangerously quiet. You don't get to decide anymore. You never should have. Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly, revealing the calculation beneath. Don't be naive. You're thinking with your heart, or perhaps lower. The board won't accept this scandal. The board works for me, not the other way around, Nathan replied. For now, Elizabeth's smile returned, cold and confident. Your father changed his will last month, Nathan. If you pursue this, if you choose them, Prescott Industries goes to your cousin. Everything you've built will be gone. The door closed on her ultimatum, leaving them facing impossible choices in the penthouse's sudden silence. She's bluffing, Layla said, though uncertainty clouded her voice. Nathan shook his head. My father's health is failing. If he changed his will, he didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung between them. Without thinking, Layla reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. I never wanted to destroy what you built. This was about truth, not revenge. His eyes met hers, searching. If I have to choose between my company and making things right with you and Matthew, it's not even a question. Has someone you loved ever shown unexpected courage when it mattered most? That rare moment when they stand beside you against everything they've known? We often discover people's true character not in comfort, but in crisis, when standing up means potentially losing everything. Have you witnessed that kind of courage? Or better yet, have you been the one to make that stand? Share below when someone surprised you by choosing what was right over what was easy. Matthew sat between the parents' fate had separated, 18 years of questions condensed into one impossible conversation about love, betrayal, and the conspiracy that had robbed him of his father. So everything I thought I knew was wrong, he said finally, after Layla and Nathan explained what they discovered. Great-grandmother engineered your divorce because she didn't approve of Mom. The restaurant's private dining room enclosed them in soft lighting and tense silence. 3 Prescotts with shared DNA, but divided by years that had carved canyons between them that words alone couldn't bridge. Not just didn't approve, Nathan clarified. She actively destroyed our marriage using methods that were likely illegal. Matthew studied his father's face, the same eyes he saw in the mirror, the jawline he'd inherited. And you never questioned it? Never demanded proof? Nathan winced. That's my greatest failure. I trusted my family over your mother. I believed the worst without sufficient evidence. The photographs looked real, Layla added, surprising both men with her partial defense of Nathan. Professional manipulation, not amateur Photoshop. Matthew turned to his mother. And you told me he abandoned us willingly. That he chose his wealth over his family. Because that's what I believed, she said softly. I didn't know about Elizabeth's interference. When Nathan didn't respond to my attempts to reach him, what else could I think? I was told you took a settlement and disappeared by choice, Nathan said. That you wanted nothing to do with the Prescott name. Matthew absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. He'd inherited Layla's analytical mind along with Nathan's features. What happens now? He asked finally. That depends partly on you, Nathan replied. I'd like to be part of your life, if you're open to it. I've missed 18 years I can never get back, but I don't want to miss any more. And what about Prescott Industries? Your grandmother said you might lose control of the company if you acknowledge me. Let her try. Nathan's voice carried the confidence that had built his reputation. The board might not like scandal, but they like profit margins more. I've tripled the company's value in 10 years. Layla watched their exchange, struck by how quickly they'd found common ground. Matthew had her determination, but Nathan's strategic thinking, a powerful combination visible even in this brief interaction. Something unfamiliar stirred in her chest as she observed Nathan with their son. Not just attraction, but a deeper ache for what should have been. Matthew's graduation photo lay on the table. Nathan absent from the milestone, Layla standing proud beside their son. I want DNA tests, Matthew announced suddenly. Not because I doubt either of you, but because I want proof I belong to both of you before I decide if I want relationships with either. His words cut through parental assumptions, reminding them both that this brilliant young man had agency in this situation. He wasn't a child to be fought over or won back. He was an adult making his own decisions. "Whatever you need," Nathan agreed immediately. "Whatever makes you comfortable." What would you ask a parent who was absent from your life if you had one chance? Would you listen to their explanation or dismiss it as too little, too late? The hardest thing about reconciliation isn't forgetting the past. It's deciding whether the future is worth the risk of new pain. Would you give someone a second chance to be family after they missed your childhood? Or would you protect yourself from potential disappointment? Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in Matthew's position? The Prescott Industries boardroom fell silent as Nathan made his announcement. He was stepping down as CEO, effective immediately, choosing his newly discovered son over the empire he'd spent his life building. "I understand this comes as a shock," Nathan said, standing at the head of the polished conference table where 15 board members sat frozen. "But recent events have forced me to reevaluate my priorities." The 30-story view of Manhattan through floor-to-ceiling windows framed the stunned faces of board members as Nathan Prescott, known for ruthless acquisition of power, voluntarily relinquished it for something he valued more. "Mr. Prescott," the chairman finally spoke, "while we respect your personal situation, this announcement without succession planning could destabilize market confidence. Our shareholders will be fine," Nathan finished firmly. "I'm not abandoning the company. I'm stepping back to chairman while we groom my son for eventual leadership." A murmur swept the room at the word son. The news hadn't yet broken publicly, though rumors had begun circulating through executive channels. "Your son?" The CFO's voice carried barely disguised shock. "Matthew Prescott, currently completing his final semester at Harvard. DNA confirmation arrived this morning." Nathan distributed folders containing Matthew's biography, academic achievements, and the paternity results. "My recommendation is that we announce this as a planned transition, emphasizing continuity and future growth." The door opened, and all heads turned as Elizabeth Prescott entered, impeccably dressed in Armani with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I believe this meeting requires family input," she announced, taking an empty seat without invitation. "Mother, you weren't invited," Nathan said coldly. "As a major shareholder in your father's proxy while he's hospitalized, I have every right to be here." She turned to the board. "Gentlemen, my son is experiencing a temporary lapse in judgment due to personal matters. I've spoken with William, and he agrees this transition is premature." The chairman cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Prescott, while we value your family's founding role in this company, operational decisions—" "Check your bylaws," Elizabeth interrupted. "In the event of potential ownership transfer, all major leadership changes require approval from primary shareholders. William's shares combined with mine constitute 40%. Nathan remained standing, unfazed. "I anticipated this, which is why I purchased an additional 12% through my private holdings last week. Combined with my existing shares, I maintain controlling interest regardless of father's position." The color drained from Elizabeth's face. "That's impossible. Those shares weren't on the market." "Jensen Fund was happy to sell at the right price," Nathan replied calmly. "Effective immediately, I am chairman. My first act is to appoint Thomas Chun as interim CEO while my son completes his education. Second, I am announcing a new division focusing on medical technology access for underserved communities." After the meeting adjourned, Nathan retreated to his private office, loosening his tie with a deep exhale. The door opened without a knock, and Layla entered, having waited in the adjacent conference room. "That was quite a performance," she said, impressed despite herself. "Not a performance, a decision 18 years overdue." Her back against his office door, his breath warm against her neck as words failed them both. 18 years of absence collapsed into inches between their bodies, the magnetic pull of what once was overwhelming what logic dictated should be. His hands framed her face with gentle pressure, questioning rather than demanding. When she didn't pull away, he leaned closer, their breath mingling in the charged space between them. The intercom buzzed, shattering the moment. "Mr. Prescott, Your mother's insisting on seeing you immediately. What would you sacrifice for family? When forced to choose between power and relationship, which matters more? Nathan Prescott spent decades building an empire, becoming one of the most powerful men in America, only to discover the foundation of his life was built on lies. Would you give up everything you've worked for to repair damage from the past? Or would you try to have both? Share your priority in the comments. What matters most to you when everything you value is at stake? Their private pain became public entertainment overnight. Every tabloid in America speculating about the black attorney who trapped the billionaire heir, the secret child, and the family feud worth billions. Prescott heir revealed. Billionaire's secret son emerges in corporate takeover attempt. The headline blazed across Matthew's phone at 5 a.m., waking him from fitful sleep in his Harvard apartment. Within minutes, his mother called. "Don't talk to anyone," Layla instructed, her lawyer voice firmly in place. "Not classmates, not professors, not even campus security. I'm sending a car." By noon, their photos plastered every news outlet. Old wedding pictures of Layla and Nathan, Matthew's Harvard yearbook photo, even security footage of their courtroom confrontation. Privacy became a luxury they could no longer afford. "They're calling me a gold digger," Layla said, scrolling through her phone in the back of the private car Nathan had arranged. 18 years of supporting us alone, putting myself through law school, and they think I engineered this for money. "They're calling me worse," Nathan replied grimly, showing her a business blog speculating about his mental fitness to lead after hiding his secret family and sudden erratic behavior. Cameras flashed like strobe lights as they exited the courthouse after an emergency hearing for a privacy injunction, Layla instinctively reaching for Nathan's hand, a gesture caught by 50 photographers who couldn't possibly understand its significance beyond their headlines. When they finally reached the safety of Layla's hotel suite, the weight of public scrutiny crushed down on them both. Matthew sat by the window, shoulders hunched as he read comment sections dissecting his existence. "I'm sorry," Nathan said, loosening his tie. "I should have anticipated this." "It was inevitable," Layla replied, kicking off her heels. Elizabeth wouldn't let this stay private. When Matthew finally went to bed, exhaustion overtaking his anger, Nathan moved toward the door. "I should go. The media is probably camped outside." "Stay," Layla said quietly. "Just stay tonight. I don't want to be alone with this." The hesitation lasted only seconds before something broke between them. Control, restraint, the carefully maintained distance. His mouth found hers with 18 years of longing, her hands pulling him closer with equal hunger. "This changes nothing," she whispered against his neck as they moved toward her bedroom. "It changes everything," he countered, lifting her against him. They fell onto the bed in a tangle of limbs and half-removed clothing, rediscovering each other with desperate intensity. Her fingers traced the unfamiliar scars on his back. 18 years leaving marks on both their bodies she hadn't witnessed forming. "I've missed you," he confessed against her skin, words he'd held back for months. "Every day since you left." "You mean since I was removed," she corrected, but without the bitterness that would have colored those words weeks before. How would you handle having your most private pain splashed across headlines? That moment when your personal history becomes public entertainment, your motives questioned by strangers who know nothing about your struggle? Would you hide away or stand your ground? The hardest part isn't the invasion of privacy. It's protecting those you love from becoming collateral damage in a story they never asked to be part of. Tell me below how you'd react if your life suddenly became front-page news. 3 ex-girlfriends, 2 broken engagements, and 1 previous marriage. All women Nathan had loved, all systematically removed by Elizabeth Prescott when they threatened her control over the family dynasty. Morning light streamed across tangled sheets when Layla's phone rang, her investigator with news that changed everything. "I found the original photos used to create the fake evidence. You weren't the only one Elizabeth targeted. There were others before you." The name Cassandra Bailey appeared in documents dating back to Nathan's college years. His first serious girlfriend abruptly disappeared after accusations of cheating. Then came Diane Wu, a brilliant engineer whose partnership with Nathan dissolved amid rumors of corporate espionage. "I need to find these women," Nathan said, pacing the hotel room while Matthew slept in the adjoining suite. "If Mother did this repeatedly." "I've already located 3, Layla replied. "My investigator has been thorough." The conference room filled with women from different decades of Nathan's life, each sharing identical stories of forged evidence and swift removal. Elizabeth Prescott's Museum of Discarded Threats gathered together for the first time. "She had someone following me for months," said Rebecca Chun, a former medical student Nathan had dated before Layla. "Photos of me with male classmates were manipulated to look romantic. Nathan received them anonymously. Same technique," added Melissa Winters, briefly engaged to Nathan after business school. "Along with evidence, I was after Prescott money. Your mother told me you decided I wasn't Prescott material and paid me to disappear." Nathan looked shell-shocked, connecting patterns that spanned 25 years. "I thought I had terrible judgment in women, that I attracted dishonesty. That was the point," Layla explained. "She systematically destroyed your trust, so you'd rely only on family, specifically her guidance." As each woman shared her experience, Matthew watched his father's face transform, anger giving way to horror, then resolve. The young man who had grown up believing his father abandoned him voluntarily now witnessed a different truth unfolding. "Did grandfather know?" Matthew asked quietly. The eldest woman there, Nancy Reynolds, William Prescott's former secretary, slid a memory drive across the table. "William Prescott knew what his wife was doing," she said quietly. "He kept evidence as insurance. Before he died last month, he gave me this to deliver when the time was right." Nathan stared at the drive like it might explode. He knew and did nothing? For decades, he benefited from her methods while keeping his hands clean, Nancy explained. "Classic William. But toward the end, when your mother's interference extended to your son, that crossed a line for him." "Too little, too late," Layla murmured. The women who Elizabeth had eliminated from Nathan's life. Accomplished, intelligent, diverse, formed an unexpected alliance that morning. Years of isolated pain transformed into collective purpose as they compiled evidence for potential legal action. Have you ever discovered you weren't someone's first victim? That moment when isolated pain suddenly connects to a larger pattern of abuse or manipulation. There's something strangely validating about learning you weren't alone, that the problem wasn't you, but part of someone's systematic behavior. How did connecting with others who shared your experience change your healing process? Did it help you move from victim to advocate? Share below how finding others with similar stories affected your recovery. William Prescott spoke from beyond the grave through his attorney's monotone voice, revealing he had known about Matthew all along and had been secretly monitoring the grandson his wife had banished. The attorney's office, with its leather-bound law books and century-old desk, became the stage for the final act of William Prescott's life, a posthumous attempt to correct what he had been too cowardly to address while alive. In a matter of the last will and testament of William Edward Prescott, the attorney began, adjusting his glasses as family members and executives filled the room. Elizabeth sat rigidly near the front, Nathan and Layla deliberately positioned across the aisle with Matthew between them. "To my wife, Elizabeth and Prescott, I leave our primary residence and the sum of $50 million, with the condition that she resign from all positions within Prescott Industries and affiliated companies." Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly, her knuckles whitening around her designer handbag. "To my son, Nathan William Prescott, I leave 30% of my holdings in Prescott Industries, with the explicit instruction that he transition to chairman of the board while grooming the next generation of leadership." Nathan's hand found Layla's under the table, their fingers intertwining in shared tension. "To my grandson, Matthew Prescott, whom I regrettably never met, I leave 30% controlling interest in Prescott Industries, with the condition that his mother, Layla Montgomery, serve as his proxy until his 25th birthday. May you forgive an old man's cowardice in not standing against injustice within his own home." The room erupted in whispers. Matthew sat perfectly still, processing the implications of a grandfather who had watched from afar without intervening. Impossible, Elizabeth finally spoke. The boy has not been legally established as a Prescott heir. This portion of the will cannot stand. Mr. Prescott anticipated your objection, the attorney replied coolly. DNA tests confirming Matthew's paternity were conducted 6 months ago using samples obtained through perfectly legal means. The results are included as Appendix C in your copies of the will. He had me followed? Matthew asked, disturbed. He had you protected, the attorney corrected. College tuition set aside through anonymous scholarships. Medical emergencies covered through foundation grants. He regretted his silence, but feared his wife's retaliation if he acknowledged you openly. Layla's emotions warred between anger at William's cowardice and grudging appreciation for the secret support. He could have stopped her at any time. Yes, Nathan agreed quietly. That's the unforgivable part. The reading continued, distributing remaining assets to various executives and charities, but the bombshell had already landed. Matthew Prescott, who'd grown up believing himself unwanted by his father's family, now controlled nearly 1/3 of a global corporation. As they left the attorney's office, Elizabeth blocked their path, her composure finally shattered. "This isn't over," she hissed, desperation replacing her usual calculated control. "I've protected this family for 40 years. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Is deathbed redemption enough? Can final acts make up for years of silence when someone could have helped but didn't?" William Prescott watched his wife destroy his son's happiness, separate him from his child, yet did nothing until death made it safe to act. Does his posthumous attempt at justice cancel his lifetime of cowardice? Or does it simply highlight what he should have done decades earlier? Tell me your thoughts on last-minute redemption. Is it better than nothing, or just a final self-serving act of someone who prioritized peace over doing what's right? The court order arrived at dawn. Emergency custody proceedings for Matthew, citing Layla's unstable influence and exploitation of a vulnerable young man for financial gain. "She's lost her mind," Nathan said, scanning the legal documents delivered to their hotel. "Matthew is 22. He's not subject to custody orders." "This isn't about custody," Layla replied, her legal mind already analyzing the strategy. "It's about control of his Prescott shares. If she can have him declared incompetent or unduly influenced, she can challenge his inheritance." Matthew emerged from his room, hair tousled from sleep, but eyes alert. "Let me see." He reviewed the documents with surprising calmness. "She's claiming Mom manipulated me my entire life to hate the Prescotts as part of a long-term financial scheme." "That's absurd," Nathan said. "You didn't even know about the inheritance until yesterday." "Facts don't matter to Elizabeth," Layla reminded him. "This is about buying time and creating doubt. Even if she loses, the headlines damage all of us." They arrived at family court 3 hours later, having assembled a legal team to counter Elizabeth's claims. The family court's institutional blandness contrasted sharply with the raw emotions on display as 3 generations of Prescotts fought over definitions of family, loyalty, and parenthood that no legal statute could adequately contain. Elizabeth sat with 2 attorneys, her composure restored behind Chanel and perfectly coiffed hair. When she caught Matthew's eye, she smiled with practiced warmth that didn't reach her eyes. "Matthew Prescott has been systematically isolated from his paternal family," Elizabeth's attorney argued. "His mother, Ms. Montgomery, has demonstrated a pattern of parental alienation designed to secure financial benefit. We asked the court to appoint an independent guardian ad litem to protect the young man's interests until psychiatric evaluation can determine the extent of manipulation." Layla's attorney countered forcefully, presenting Matthew's academic achievements, letters from professors, and evidence of his independence. Nathan testified about Elizabeth's history of interference, submitting the compiled evidence from her previous victims. Throughout the proceedings, Matthew watched silently, his expression thoughtful rather than distressed. When the judge asked if he wished to speak, he surprised everyone by approaching the bench directly. "Your Honor, I've listened to my grandmother claim I'm being manipulated by my mother, while simultaneously trying to manipulate this court to control my inheritance. For 18 years, I had one parent who gave me everything. Now I've found my father who's willing to give up everything for me. The only person trying to control me for money is the woman bringing these charges. Elizabeth rose suddenly, her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful." "Mrs. Prescott," the judge warned, "I built this family." Elizabeth continued, ignoring her attorney's attempts to quiet her. "Everything we have exists because I made the hard choices, removed the obstacles, protected our legacy." As Elizabeth lunged from her seat, the courtroom erupted, and Layla saw what no one else noticed. Elizabeth's hand reaching inside her designer handbag. "Nathan," Layla called out in warning, years of protective instinct overriding everything else. "Well, have you seen someone young stand up with unexpected courage against family pressure? There's something powerful about watching the youngest person in the room speak the clearest truth, cutting through manipulation with straightforward wisdom adults often lack." Matthew Prescott grew up without wealth or family connections, but with something more valuable: the ability to recognize authenticity. Would you have had the courage to speak up against a powerful family figure at his age? Or would you have remained silent, intimidated by power and status? Share your experience with standing up to family pressure, whether you succeeded or wish you had tried. The gleam of metal from Elizabeth's purse registered in Nathan's mind seconds before he threw himself between his mother and the family she was determined to destroy one final time. "Gun!" someone shouted as court officers rushed forward. Nathan reached his mother just as she withdrew a small, pearl-handled pistol, his hands closing around her wrist. "Let go!" Elizabeth hissed, struggling against her son's grip. "Everything I've done was for this family." Chaos erupted in slow motion, security rushing forward, Matthew pulling Layla backward, Nathan facing his mother with palms raised. The tableau of a family fractured beyond conventional repair, yet somehow forming new bonds in the breaking. "Mother, please," Nathan said quietly, maintaining pressure on her wrist until the weapon clattered to the floor. Court officers swarmed them immediately, restraining Elizabeth while others secured the firearm. "You've destroyed everything." Elizabeth spat as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. 40 years building the Prescott name, and you throw it away for them. "No," Nathan replied calmly. "You destroyed it with your manipulation. I'm trying to rebuild something authentic from what's left." The judge ordered immediate psychiatric evaluation for Elizabeth, while court officers escorted the rest of them to a secure waiting room. Matthew sat between his parents, the three of them physically united for the first time since his infancy. "Are you okay?" Layla asked Nathan, noticing his hands trembling slightly. "I never thought she'd go this far," he admitted. "All these years, I believed her controlling behavior came from love, misguided but well-intentioned." "Power," Layla corrected gently. "It was always about power." When they were finally cleared to leave, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Nathan instinctively positioned himself as a shield, guiding Layla and Matthew toward the waiting car, while security created a path. At the hospital where Elizabeth had been taken for evaluation, Nathan insisted on checking her condition despite Layla's concerns. "She's still my mother," he explained simply. While Nathan spoke with doctors, Layla paced the sterile waiting room, adrenaline still coursing through her system. When he returned, the mixture of relief and shock on his face pulled her toward him without conscious thought. The hospital supply closet door barely closed behind them before his mouth found hers, life-affirming heat coursing between them, his hands trembling against her face. "I could have lost you both again," he whispered against her neck. "Never," she promised, pulling him closer, the thin barrier of scrubs between them doing nothing to disguise how desperately they needed this connection. Her hand slid beneath his shirt, tracing the familiar planes of his chest, while his mouth explored the sensitive spot below her ear that he somehow remembered after 18 years. When he lifted her against the door, her legs wrapped around his waist with instinctive memory. "This is crazy," she gasped as his hands found bare skin beneath her blouse. "This is us," he corrected, his voice rough with desire. It's always been us. They came together with desperate intensity, clothes partially discarded, reconnecting physically in a way that transcended their complicated history. For those moments, they weren't adversaries or co-parents or business partners. They were simply Nathan and Layla, finding in each other the missing piece neither had been able to replace. Afterward, as they straightened clothing and returned to the reality waiting outside, a nurse approached with news that Elizabeth was stabilized but requesting to speak with Nathan immediately. "I'll come with you," Layla offered, surprising herself. As Elizabeth was led into the conference room in handcuffs, she called out one final threat. Ask her about Thomas Winters. Ask her what really happened to her law school mentor. The words hung in the air as Nathan turned to Layla, whose face had drained of color. "Who's Thomas Winters?" he asked, watching 18 years of carefully constructed walls threatening to crumble in her eyes. Have you ever experienced that moment when crisis clarifies exactly what matters most? When fear strips away everything but the essential truth? Sometimes it takes losing something, or nearly losing it, to recognize its true value. The Prescotts faced literal danger today, but many of us experience metaphorical gun moments that force us to decide what and who truly matters. Tell me about your moment of clarity when everything superficial fell away and you saw your priorities with perfect vision. What did you choose, and did you regret your decision? The Boston brownstone where their marriage had ended 18 years ago stood before them, the key in Nathan's hand offering not just re-entry to a place, but a second chance neither had dared imagine possible. "You kept it," Layla said softly, staring at the familiar facade that had once been their first home together. "I couldn't sell it," Nathan admitted. "Even when I believed the worst about you, I couldn't let this place go." Snow fell gently on the brownstone steps where she had once stood with an infant and shattered dreams. Now, those same steps welcomed 3 pairs of footprints leading to a door Nathan held open, not just to a house, but to the future they'd been denied. Inside, the space had been preserved like a time capsule. Their wedding photo still hanging in the entryway, furniture arranged as Layla had left it, even Matthew's nursery intact behind a closed door. "Thomas Winters," Nathan said once they were settled in the living room, Matthew exploring the house that should have been his childhood home. "Elizabeth's final attempt to drive us apart. Who was he?" Layla took a deep breath. "My law school professor. When I left Boston with nothing, he helped me secure emergency scholarships. Later, he recommended me for my first legal position. That doesn't sound like something Elizabeth could use against you. He was also married to a Prescott cousin. He never told me until after I graduated. He kept our connection secret because he knew helping me would anger your family." Nathan nodded slowly, understanding, and Elizabeth would twist that into something inappropriate. "Exactly," Layla confirmed. "Thomas was never anything but professional, but Elizabeth would have made it seem like I traded favors for advancement." Elizabeth remained under psychiatric hold, facing charges for the courthouse incident. Williamsville stood unchallenged after her outburst confirmed the pattern of manipulation described in the document. The Prescott family legacy was forever altered, not destroyed as Elizabeth had feared, but transformed into something more authentic. Matthew decided to finish his degree before joining Prescott Industries, spending weekends getting to know the father he'd grown up without. Watching them together, Layla felt the final pieces of her bitterness dissolving. That night, after Matthew returned to campus, Nathan and Layla found themselves alone in the master bedroom that had witnessed both their earliest happiness and deepest betrayal. "Stay," Nathan said simply, no pressure or expectation in his voice, just an invitation. Their bodies remembered what their minds had tried to forget, the perfect synchronicity, the whispered words that belonged only to them. 18 years, he murmured against her shoulder. "We have 18 years to make up for." Her fingers traced patterns on his chest as moonlight painted them silver. "Then we better not waste another minute," she answered, pulling him back to her with the certainty that this time, nothing would tear them apart. 3 months later, they stood together on those same brownstone steps, watching movers carry furniture in rather than out. Nathan's arm circled Layla's waist as Matthew directed the placement of his belongings in the renovated third-floor apartment. "We're doing this backward," Nathan observed. "Most couples have children who eventually move out, not in." "We're not most couples," Layla replied, leaning into his embrace. "We're making up for lost time. If you could restart a relationship that once meant everything to you, would you? Or are some broken things meant to stay broken?" The Prescotts lost 18 years to manipulation and lies, years that can never be recovered. Yet sometimes, the foundation remains strong enough to build something new on the ruins of what was destroyed. Tell me in the comments if you believe true love can survive long separation, and what you would do if given the chance to reclaim what you thought was lost forever. Has someone from your past returned to show you that time doesn't always destroy connection? Or do you believe some chapters should remain closed once they've ended?